Welcome to our deep dive today.
Okay.
We're going to be looking at The Power of Habit by Charles Duhigg.
Great book.
It's a really interesting book about how habits form, how they work, and most importantly, how we can change them.
Yeah, it's incredible how much of our behavior is driven by these unconscious patterns.
Yeah.
And the book starts with a story about a woman named Lisa
Oh, yeah.
who completely transformed her life after a trip to the Egyptian desert.
This is a really great story because it kind of shows how a small change can trigger like a domino effect.
Mm-hmm.
So Lisa, she was going through a divorce,
Oh.
feeling kind of lost, and she decides impulsively to join this desert caravan.
Wow.
And when she's packing, she realizes she can't bring cigarettes.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So that one tiny change forced by her circumstances was enough to help her quit smoking for good.
And what's amazing is that quitting smoking was just the beginning.
Yeah.
Like, over the next 6 months, she replaced smoking with jogging.
Oh,
And then she started eating healthy, sleeping better, even managing her finances more effectively.
Ah,
She eventually ran marathons, went back to school, bought a house, and even got engaged.
it's like her whole life shifted on its axis.
It really is.
So what can we learn from Lisa's story? It shows us that our habits are all interconnected.
Yeah,
And changing one habit can trigger this chain reaction, influencing other areas of our lives.
exactly. And at the heart of every habit is this 3-part neurological pattern
Okay.
called the habit loop.
Okay.
Starts with a cue,
Uh-huh.
which is anything that triggers the habit, then comes the routine,
Right.
the actual behavior itself.
Got it.
And finally, the reward, which reinforces the habit and makes you want to repeat it.
So like when you first learned to back your car out of the driveway,
Right.
it took a lot of concentration at first,
Mm.
adjusting the mirrors,
Mm-hmm.
checking for traffic, remembering all the steps.
Yeah,
But now it's automatic,
totally.
thanks to the habit loop.
Your brain has learned the pattern.
Yeah.
It doesn't need to expend as much energy each time you do it.
So it's really our brain on autopilot.
It is. And that habit loop is controlled by a part of your brain called the basal ganglia,
Okay.
a really ancient structure responsible for storing and executing these automatic patterns of behavior.
Interesting.
It's essentially your brain's autopilot, allowing your conscious mind to focus on other things.
So even though we like to think we're making conscious decisions all the time, a lot of our actions are driven by these deeply ingrained habits.
Absolutely. And that brings us to this really interesting point
Right.
about the role of craving in habit formation.
Right.
The reward at the end of the habit loop isn't always something obvious,
Okay.
like a piece of chocolate or a paycheck.
Right.
It can be a feeling, a sensation, or even just a sense of relief.
Huh.
And Duhigg uses the example of Pepsodent toothpaste to illustrate this.
Okay.
Back in the early 1900s, people weren't really into brushing their teeth regularly.
I guess it wasn't like the essential daily ritual it is today.
Exactly. So Pepsodent's marketing guru, Claude Hopkins, he needed to find a way to make people crave toothpaste.
I see.
He stumbled upon something called tooth film.
Tooth film.
Yeah, it's a natural coating on teeth, but it wasn't really harmful, but it gave him like the perfect hook.
Okay.
He started advertising Pepsodent as the solution to removing this unsightly film, promising bright, sparkling teeth.
I see.
But the real genius was in the formula itself.
What do you mean?
Pepsodent contains citric acid and mint oil, which created a tingling sensation in the mouth.
Ah, so that familiar tingle wasn't just about clean teeth.
Exactly. That tingle became the reward people craved.
Wow.
They associated it with clean teeth, even though the tingling itself had nothing to do with actual cleanliness.
Really?
Yeah.
That's fascinating.
So by creating that craving, Pepsodent essentially hacked the habit loop and turned toothbrushing into a daily ritual.
So companies are really aware of how these habits work, and they use that knowledge to influence our behavior.
They do. Another great example is how Procter & Gamble transformed Febreze from a flop into a best-selling product.
Febreze, the air freshener.
Yeah, initially they marketed it as an odor eliminator for things like pet smells and stale smoke.
Oh, so like to get rid of bad smells.
Right, but people didn't really want to admit their home stank.
Yeah, I guess not.
So sales were sluggish.
Makes sense.
Through research, P&G discovered that people actually craved a signal.
A signal.
Yeah, like to let them know their cleaning was complete,
Oh, okay.
that their homes were truly fresh.
I see.
They wanted that sense of accomplishment and satisfaction.
So it wasn't really about eliminating the bad smells.
No, it was about the feeling you got after cleaning.
Interesting.
So P&G reframed Febreze as part of a cleaning ritual.
Oh, okay.
Instead of just eliminating bad smells, it became the final touch, the reward for a job well done.
So that burst of fresh scent signal to clean home.
Exactly.
And it worked.
Brilliantly, sales skyrocketed because P&G tapped into that subconscious craving.
For a clean-smelling home.
Yes, and it wasn't about the actual cleaning. It was
Mhm.
about the feeling of accomplishment and that sensory cue of the scent.
This is really making me think about all my own habits.
Yeah.
Are there things I'm doing simply because I've been conditioned to crave a certain reward?
Yeah, it's something to think about.
What about you? Have you noticed any patterns in your own behavior that might be driven by these subconscious cravings?
Definitely makes you more aware of things, doesn't it?
It does, and that's just the beginning of our deep dive into the power of habit.
There's so much more to uncover.
We'll be back to explore even more fascinating examples of how companies and individuals have harnessed the power of habit.
Stay tuned. It's kind of wild, isn't it?
What is?
How companies can manipulate our habits.
Yeah, for sure.
It really highlights how important it is to understand how these patterns work.
Totally.
Once we're aware of that habit loop,
Mm-hmm.
we can start to recognize those cues and rewards that are shaping our behavior.
Yeah, and then we can make different choices.
Exactly. And one of the coolest concepts Duhigg talks about is keystone habits.
Oh, yeah, I remember this from the book.
These are habits that when you change them,
They have a ripple effect,
Yeah.
influencing other habits and areas of your life.
So instead of trying to change every single habit at once,
Right.
you can focus on identifying these key habits.
The ones that can trigger broader positive changes.
It's like a domino effect.
Exactly. Think of keystone habits as the cornerstones of your daily routine.
Okay.
They're the habits that, when shifted, create this cascade effect,
Interesting.
impacting other areas of your life.
So Duhigg talks about Michael Phelps, the Olympic swimmer.
Oh, yeah. Great example.
His coach, Bob Bowman, was like a master at using these principles
He was amazing.
to shape Phelps' performance.
One of the keystone habits Bowman instilled in Phelps was a rigorous pre-race routine.
Oh, wow. So what would he do?
Before every race, Phelps would meticulously visualize every aspect of the swim,
Okay.
from the dive to the final stroke.
Wow.
He'd picture himself winning in perfect detail,
Really?
engaging all his senses in the mental rehearsal.
It's like he was programming his brain for success. Right before each race, Bowman would whisper the same phrase.
What was it?
Get the videotape ready.
Huh, interesting.
And that was the cue for Phelps to enter this state of intense focus and relaxation.
So they did this every
For
time.
every single race.
Wow. So that routine became so ingrained
Yeah.
that Phelps could rely on it even under pressure.
It's like that time at the Olympics when his goggles filled with water mid-race.
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
Most swimmers would have panicked.
Right.
But Phelps, because of his mental training and that ingrained routine, he stayed calm.
Wow.
He'd visualized this exact scenario.
So he knew what to do.
Exactly. He relied on his training and his routine to guide him to victory.
It's so inspiring that keystone habits can give us control even when things go wrong.
Absolutely. And the best part is keystone habits aren't just for elite athletes.
Right.
Duhigg highlights how everyday habits like exercise and food journaling can be keystone habits too.
Yeah, that makes sense. When you start exercising regularly, you're more likely to make healthier food choices. You prioritize sleep and manage stress better.
It creates this positive upward spiral.
Totally.
Yeah.
And keeping a food journal, you become more aware of your eating patterns. You can identify triggers for unhealthy habits.
Exactly.
So if you want to make positive changes in your life, a good place to start is by identifying one or two keystone habits.
Habits that can have that ripple effect on other areas.
Okay, so how do we actually change our habits then?
Well, the good news is there's a framework that can help.
Okay, tell me.
Duhigg calls it the golden rule of habit change.
Right.
And it's pretty simple, actually.
Okay.
You keep the cue and the reward the same,
Okay.
but you insert a new routine.
So you're kind of like hijacking the existing habit loop.
Exactly. You're redirecting it towards a new, more desirable behavior.
Interesting.
Duhigg uses the example of Alcoholics Anonymous,
Okay.
which has a really high success rate.
Yeah.
One reason it works so well is that it provides a new routine,
Like attending meetings and sharing stories.
right? Building those supportive relationships to replace the old routine of drinking.
But the cue and the reward stay the same.
They do the craving for relief, connection, or escape,
Okay.
and the reward, a sense of belonging, support, or release.
Interesting.
It's just the method of achieving that reward that changes.
That makes a lot of sense.
By understanding the craving behind the habit, AA helps people find healthier ways to satisfy that need.
So this golden rule can be applied to any habit.
It can, breaking bad ones and building good ones.
So it's not just about willpower.
No, it's about understanding the mechanics of the habit loop
Right.
and then strategically tweaking it to your advantage.
I like that. And another key element in habit change is willpower.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of people think willpower is something you're born with, but Duhigg says it's more like a muscle.
You can strengthen it with practice.
So it's not about having superhuman willpower.
Nope.
It's about developing it like any other skill.
He uses the example of Starbucks.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they have these training programs
What for?
to help their baristas build willpower
Okay.
and provide excellent customer service even under pressure.
That's interesting. So they actually train for that.
Mm-hmm.
I never thought about that.
And by practicing self-control in one area of their lives, those baristas are more likely to exhibit willpower in other areas too.
Makes sense.
It's like a positive feedback loop.
The more we practice self-control, the stronger that willpower muscle becomes.
Exactly.
So change is possible.
It is.
It's not about being perfect. It's about practicing those small acts of self-regulation.
Over time, that leads to greater willpower.
Okay, so we've learned a lot about the habit loop, the role of craving, and the influence of keystone habits.
We have.
And this gives us more control over our behaviors than we think.
It really does.
It's about becoming the architects of our habits.
rather than letting them unconsciously shape our lives.
I like that. And one of the most encouraging messages from Duhigg's book
Yeah,
is that even small changes can make a big difference.
they really can.
It's about taking those small wins and building momentum.
And not trying to overhaul your whole life overnight.
Just focus on those key habits and let the ripple effect work its magic.
You got it.
It's amazing how these principles of habit formation apply not just to individuals, but also to larger groups.
It is.
It's like organizations and even society as a whole.
Duhigg takes us inside companies,
Okay.
showing how they just like people develop these routines and behaviors.
That shape their culture and performance.
Right. It's like every organization has its own unwritten rules.
Yeah, its own way of doing things.
Exactly.
So does he give any examples of this?
He uses Alcoa,
Alcoa.
the aluminum company,
Okay.
to show how keystone habits can transform an entire organization.
So what happened at Alcoa?
When Paul O'Neill became CEO in the 80s,
Mm-hmm.
everyone thought he would focus on financial performance.
Well, yeah, shareholder value and all that.
But he surprised everyone.
What have you?
He made worker safety his top priority.
Worker safety?
Yeah, he believed that if they changed Alcoa's safety habits, it would have a ripple effect,
Yeah.
improving quality, productivity, and eventually profitability.
That's a pretty different approach.
It was a big shift.
So how did he make it happen?
He instituted this new rule.
What was it?
Anytime there was an accident,
Even a small one.
yeah, even a minor one, the unit president had to report it to him
Directly to the CEO.
within 24 hours, and with a plan to prevent it from happening again.
Wow, that's serious.
It sent a clear message that safety was everyone's responsibility.
Top to bottom.
It made managers pay attention to hazards,
Yeah.
communicate better, and create a culture of accountability.
So by focusing on worker safety, this one keystone habit,
Yeah.
O'Neill created a chain reaction of positive changes.
Throughout the entire company,
And did it work?
the results were amazing.
Really?
Not only did workplace injuries go way down,
Uh-huh.
Alcoa's profits went way up.
Wow. So it really paid off.
It became one of the best performing companies in the Dow.
So it's not just about the numbers.
No.
It's about creating that culture where people feel valued.
And empowered to do their best.
And Duhigg talks about social movements too, right?
He does. He uses the Montgomery bus boycott.
The civil rights movement.
Exactly.
Powerful example.
It started with Rosa Parks' arrest,
Right.
but it really took off because of the strong social ties in the Black community.
People felt connected to Rosa Parks and obligated to their community.
Exactly. It's social proof.
You see others taking a stand,
You're more likely to join in.
and as more people joined, it became harder to resist.
Even if you weren't directly involved at first.
Right. The power of the group.
And Duhigg points out another important factor.
What that?
People saw themselves as agents of change.
They weren't just following orders.
They took ownership of the movement.
Became leaders themselves.
That sense of agency is really powerful.
So we see this idea of craving coming up again and again.
In our personal habits, in organizations, even in social movements.
It's the engine that drives the habit loop.
But those cravings can be really subtle.
We're not always aware of them.
Exactly. And that's why understanding the power of habit is so important.
We can make more conscious choices.
When we're aware of the habit loop, the role of craving,
And those keystone habits.
right, we can take control instead of letting our habits control us.
And remember, change is possible.
Even small changes can make a big difference.
It's been great exploring these ideas with you today,
I agree.
and I hope our listeners are inspired to think about their own habits.
To identify those areas where they want to make changes.
So what's one small habit you could change today that might make a big impact on your life tomorrow?
It could be anything, really.
Getting more sleep? Going for a walk?
Yeah.
Even expressing gratitude more often?
Possibilities are endless.
Remember, you have the power to make that change. For more such contents, go to our channel, Pages and Perspectives. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and press bell icon to get latest updates. Thank you for joining us. If you have any suggestion or book requirement, please comment. It will help us to improve